She clutched her baby with one arm and threw the other in front of the truck's tire, shielding the boy who had never even spoken her name. Zariah Washington stood at the marble kitchen island of the Weston estate, bouncing her 8-month-old son gently against her hip. The baby, Micah, had been running a low fever all night, but calling off wasn't an option. Not when she needed this job more than she needed sleep. Not when she was working in a house where sick children didn't stop the world. Nannies just pushed through. In the background, the soft pings of the dishwasher blended with the hum of distant traffic. Outside the glass walls, the morning sun rose over an immaculate lawn, dotted with garden sculptures and security cameras. A world Zariah didn't belong in, only worked in. She adjusted her uniform, wiped spit up from her shoulder with a napkin, and looked up just in time to see Nathan, the Weston's 6-year-old son, running past the sliding glass door barefoot and pale. His asthma had been flaring again, but his father barely noticed, and his mother wasn't here anymore. Zariah flinched. "Nathan," she called through the door. "Slow down, baby." But he didn't hear her, or didn't care. Across town, Grant Weston straightened his tie in the mirrored elevator of Weston Co. His reflection stared back at him, sharp jawline, perfect suit, dead eyes. His phone buzzed with calendar alerts and missed calls. He ignored most of them. "Mr. Weston, boardroom in 5, came a voice in his earpiece. He nodded, but didn't respond. Inside the boardroom, his executive team shuffled nervously. They were ready to present quarterly losses, but Grant wasn't thinking about numbers. He was thinking about the voicemail he hadn't dared open yet, from Nathan's pediatrician. More tests, more possible complications, but he'd deal with that later. Right now he had a company to run, a legacy to protect. Emotions were inefficient. "Let's begin," he said coldly. Back at the estate, Zariah chased after Nathan, who'd somehow slipped out the front gate. Her heart pounded, not from the run but from fear. What if he collapsed again? What if his lungs gave out this time? She didn't think, she just moved. Micah whimpered in her arms. She adjusted him as she ran. Nathan had darted into the crosswalk at the end of the block laughing, oblivious. That's when she heard it, the engine, the screech, the too-late honk. Zariah screamed, "Nathan, stop!" And everything slowed. If you're already feeling this, yet if your heart skipped for her just now, don't just watch silently. Subscribe. This channel tells stories others are too afraid to tell. Zariah didn't remember screaming. All she remembered was Micah's tiny head pressed to her shoulder and the flash of white headlights rounding the corner too fast. The truck's tires screeched, but it was already too late. Nathan froze in the street, paralyzed in that childlike way where fear becomes stillness. Zariah didn't hesitate. She ran. Micah cried, his baby fingers tangled in her curls, but she gripped him tighter, sprinting with everything she had. A split second before metal met flesh, she threw her body sideways, one arm around her baby, the other flung out protectively in front of Nathan's chest. The impact never came. The truck stopped, tires locked just inches from their bodies. But Zariah didn't notice. She was sobbing, clutching both boys, her body curled on the pavement like a human shield. Nathan's eyes were wide. He still hadn't spoken. Micah whimpered, confused but alive. Gasps erupted from the sidewalks. From his sleek black car a few yards away, Grant Weston watched in stunned horror. He had just turned onto his street. He had just come home for lunch, a rare move. And now, was that Nathan? He threw the car into park and bolted from the vehicle. "Nathan!" he yelled, running to the scene. The driver of the truck was out of the cab, apologizing, pale and shaking. Zariah slowly looked up, her cheek scraped, her uniform torn, knees bleeding, but her arms stayed locked around both boys. "Zariah?" Grant's voice cracked as he dropped to his knees. What happened?" She said nothing at first. Then, voice trembling, "He ran into the street. I couldn't let him die." She stood, wobbling slightly, her own baby still balanced on her hip, chest rising and falling like she'd just outrun death. Because she had. Nathan, coughing now, reached for his father, something he hadn't done in months. Grant scooped him up, but his eyes never left Zariah. She hadn't run away. She'd jumped into danger, while protecting someone else's child with her own in her arms. Everything he thought he knew about her, about people like her, cracked in an instant. The living room of the Western estate felt colder than usual, even with the sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Zariah sat stiffly on the edge of the leather couch, one hand resting protectively on Micah's stroller. Across from her, Grant stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, jaw clenched. Nathan was upstairs with the house nurse. He was fine, physically, but his silence lingered. "You should have told me you brought your baby to work," Grant said flatly. Zariah looked up, blinking. "I didn't have a choice." "I pay for childcare," he said, pacing now. "You're paid well, Zariah. What happened, it could have gone another way if that truck hadn't stopped." "But it did stop," she snapped, voice low but shaking. "And your son is alive." Grant stared at her. He wasn't used to being spoken to that way. "I didn't ask for a thank you," she added, standing now, "but don't make me the problem because I happened to save your son with my baby in my arms." Silence dropped between them like a stone in water. She didn't wait for a reply. She turned, began gathering Micah's things. "I should go. I know what this means. You're probably already thinking about letting me go." Grant's voice was quieter now. "That's not what I said." "It's what you meant." "No," he said. "It's what you assumed. You think I'm just some cold rich man who doesn't care what happened today." Zariah paused, then turned around slowly. "Am I wrong?" He didn't answer. Because in truth, until today, maybe she wasn't. He had buried himself in boardrooms and spreadsheets, missed doctor's appointments, blamed nannies for emotional distance he had caused. Today, all of that stood in front of him, in the shape of a woman who had just put her life on the line. But Grant did what men like him did best. He pushed it down. He cleared his throat. "Take the day off. I'll have someone else handle Nathan tonight." Zariah exhaled, not in relief, but in disappointment. "Right," she said. "Of course." And just like that, two people who had lived through a miracle walked away like it hadn't happened. At this point, what do you think he should do? Apologize? Explain? Open up? And if you're still watching and not subscribed, really? After this? Hit the button. These aren't just stories. They're truths we all feel but never say. It had been 2 days since the street incident. Zariah hadn't returned to work. She hadn't been fired, but she hadn't been called back either. And in her world, silence from the rich usually meant goodbye. She sat at her tiny kitchen table in her one-bedroom apartment, bouncing Micah on her lap, replaying everything over and over. The truck, Nathan's face, Grant's eyes, the words they didn't say. Then, a knock. She peeked through the door's peephole and froze. Grant Weston, standing outside her apartment like he belonged in this part of town, dressed in black slacks, no jacket, no driver, just him. She opened the door cautiously. "Mr. Weston?" "Can I come in?" he asked, glancing past her shoulder. She stepped aside silently. He walked into the modest space. There were baby bottles drying near the sink, a second-hand high chair, faded family photos tacked to the wall. This wasn't a maid's quarters. This was a life. And Grant suddenly felt like a stranger to it all. "Why are you here?" she asked. He took a slow breath. "Nathan's been asking for you." That made her heart skip. "I thought he didn't talk much." "He doesn't," Grant said. "But when the nurse tried to give him his meds this morning, he whispered your name." Zariah blinked. "I need your help. He's refusing to eat, refusing to sleep." He looked at her now, really looked. "I thought I could fix it by throwing money at new staff, but he doesn't want staff. He wants you." Zariah crossed her arms. "So this is you hiring me back?" He shook his head. "This is me asking you, as a father." That hit harder than he expected it to. She stared at him for a long moment. Then softly, "I'll come, for Nathan, but this changes nothing between us." Grant nodded. Understood. But deep down, both of them knew everything had already changed. The Western mansion was quieter than usual. Nathan sat curled beside Zariah on the oversized sofa in the sunroom. His head rested gently against her arm, the same arm that had saved his life. Micah slept in a bassinet beside them. Zariah had brought him, though she hadn't asked for permission, and Grant hadn't objected. In the kitchen, Grant stood just outside of sight, watching the scene through the open archway. It was the first time in months that Nathan had smiled, just a soft one, as Zariah read aloud from a picture book. Later, after Nathan had been tucked into bed, Grant walked her to the front door. She stopped near the foyer mirror. "I'll be back tomorrow at the usual time." "Zariah," he said, voice low, "can we talk for a second?" She hesitated. He gestured toward the sitting room. "Just 5 minutes." Reluctantly, she followed him back in and sat, crossing one leg over the other. "You said this changes nothing," Grant started. "But it's changing me." Zariah raised an eyebrow. "I don't know what that means." He looked down at his hands. "My wife died in this house. 2 years ago. Cancer. Quick. Brutal. I didn't handle it well. I thought burying myself in work would make it less real." She didn't respond. "I stopped showing up for Nathan emotionally. I told myself I was protecting him, keeping things stable, but I was really just disappearing." His voice cracked at the edge. "I didn't even notice he stopped speaking after her funeral." "Not really." Zariah's eyes softened. She hadn't known. After a pause, she spoke. "I lost someone too. Not Micah's father. I never had him. But my mom. She raised me while working night shifts, double jobs. She taught me how to fight. And when she passed, I promised myself Micah would never feel that kind of alone." The silence between them was thick, not uncomfortable, but honest. Two people who had buried their pain in different ways. "I judged you," Zariah said finally. "When I started this job, I thought you were just another cold man with too much money." He nodded. "I was." They looked at each other then, and for the first time, not as employer and maid, but as two broken people doing their best. It started with a laugh, a real one. Nathan had insisted on making cookies with Zariah in the Western kitchen, and it ended with flour on the floor, chocolate on his nose, and somehow Micah sitting in a mixing bowl. The boys giggled. Zariah tried not to, failed, and soon even Grant was laughing. The sound was so unfamiliar, it startled him. When the kids were tucked in that evening, Grant stayed behind. Zariah lingered too, rinsing dishes with her sleeves rolled up, humming an old gospel tune softly under her breath. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," Grant said suddenly from behind her. Zariah turned. "Is that a compliment?" "I think so." She smirked. "You need to get out more." He leaned against the counter. "You're right." A beat passed. Then, "I never knew Nathan liked baking." Zariah nodded, drying her hands. "He doesn't. He just likes doing it with someone who sees him." The words hit harder than he expected. She continued, gentler now. "You've got a good kid, Grant. You haven't lost him. Not yet." Their eyes met, and for a moment the air changed. Not romantic, not yet, but human. Raw. Real. Zariah turned toward the fridge and pulled out 2 bottled waters. She tossed him one. He caught it. "So, what's your story, Zariah?" She hesitated. "Honestly, I can take it." She shrugged. "I didn't grow up with much. My mom cleaned houses too. Always told me to keep my head down, work hard, stay invisible if I had to. I tried. But sometimes I think maybe I'm meant to be seen." "You are," Grant said softly. Zariah froze, startled by the sincerity. A long silence hung between them, the kind where something unspoken passes between people, something fragile, something new. She glanced down, then smiled. "So, are you going to help clean up the rest of this flour, or do rich guys get a pass?" Grant chuckled. "I've got 2 hands. Then start sweeping, Mr. Weston. If you smiled just now, if this tiny moment of peace hit your heart like it did ours, subscribe. These stories are for you. And if you're still watching, maybe you need them too. The morning was colder than usual. Zariah arrived at the Western estate like always, diaper bag slung over one shoulder, Micah bundled in a fleece hoodie, Nathan's favorite muffins in a small paper bag. But the air felt off. The maid at the front door wouldn't meet her eyes. Grant was already in the foyer, dressed in a sharp navy suit, arms crossed, cold, closed off. Zariah's smile faded. Something wrong? He held up his phone. I got a call from the private security firm. They ran background checks on all household staff. I told them not to. Standard protocol resumed while I was out of town. She tensed. Okay. They flagged something. His voice was flat. 2 years ago, you were charged with shoplifting. Baby formula, diapers from a pharmacy. Zariah froze. I wasn't convicted. You didn't disclose it on your application. Her voice tightened. Because I knew exactly how someone like you would react. He didn't flinch. You lied. I survived, she snapped. I had nothing, no help, no job. My son was starving, Grant. What would you have done? He looked away. Let me guess, she said, anger now surfacing with shame. This changes everything, right? All that bonding, all those late-night talks, your son smiling again. None of it matters, because I was once desperate enough to steal a can of formula. It matters, he said quickly. But not enough. The room fell silent. Zariah stared at him like he was a stranger again. She stepped back. I'll pack our things. Zariah, I'm not going to stand here and be reduced to one mistake by a man who's been running from his own grief for 2 years. Her voice cracked. I gave you my time, my care, my story, and the first thing you did when you got scared was dig into my past. Micah began to cry, sensing the tension. Zariah bent to pick him up. Her hands shook. Grant didn't stop her, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know how. Zariah sat at her kitchen table long after Micah had fallen asleep. A single lamp lit the room, casting shadows on peeling wallpaper and baby toys. She stared at the unopened envelope from her landlord, another late notice. But even that wasn't what hurt the most. It was Nathan, his face when she walked away. His quiet Z as the front door closed. She pressed a palm to her mouth, choking back a sob. She'd never meant to get attached, but somewhere between bedtime stories and chocolate chip cookies, she had. And somewhere along the way, she had let herself hope. Across town, Grant stood in Nathan's doorway. His son sat on the floor, hugging a stuffed bear Zariah had sewn back together with red thread. His eyes were glassy but dry, silent. She's not coming back, is she? Nathan whispered, voice small. Grant's throat tightened. He crouched. I don't know. Nathan nodded, then, it was your fault. That hit like a punch. Grant didn't respond. What could he say? He had ruined it, reacted like a man more concerned with his staff's record than their soul. Later that night, alone in his office, Grant pulled up Zariah's file again. One petty charge, dismissed, over baby formula. He thought about the woman who had thrown herself in front of a truck to save his child, the woman who had let her walls down even when she had every reason not to, and he had looked at her pain and turned it into a liability. Zariah hadn't eaten all day. The doorbell rang just as she finished feeding Micah a bottle. She peeked through the curtain. Grant Weston again. This time holding something in his hand, a folded piece of fabric. She opened the door but didn't say a word. I found this in Nathan's room, he said quietly. Micah's blanket. She took it slowly, fingers brushing his. I came to say I'm sorry, he added, for treating you like a problem to fix, for digging through your life when I should have just listened. Zariah swallowed, voice low. You were scared. So were you, he said, but you showed up anyway. I didn't. Silence stretched between them. Don't do this because you feel guilty, she warned. I don't need saving. I know, he said, but maybe I do. The Western home smelled like vanilla and something warm in the oven. Zariah stepped inside slowly, uncertainly. Micah was in her arms, tucked beneath his favorite blue blanket, the one Grant had returned. Nathan's voice echoed down the hallway. Zariah! He ran toward her, breathless, asthma inhaler clipped to his belt. She bent to hug him, nearly crying when he wrapped his arms tightly around her neck. "I missed you," he whispered. "I missed you too, baby." Grant stood quietly behind Nathan, hands in his pockets. He hadn't texted, hadn't called, just left the front door unlocked, hoping. "I told him you might come back today," Nathan said proudly, then ran off toward the kitchen. Zariah stood slowly, facing Grant. "I wasn't sure you would," he said. "I wasn't sure either," she replied. He looked different somehow, not in clothes or expression, but in the way he held still. He wasn't running anymore. "I asked Nathan what he wanted for his birthday," Grant said. "He said, Zariah and Micah, in that order." She laughed gently, hand over her heart. "I didn't come back for a job," she said softly. "I know. I came back because I think we all deserve a second chance." "I do too," he said, "especially the ones who never got a first." There was silence again, but this time it wasn't heavy. Grant stepped closer. "I can't undo what I said, or how I acted, but I want to do better, as a father, as a man, and if you'll let me, maybe even as something more." Zariah searched his eyes. He wasn't perfect. He was still learning. But he saw her now, not as the maid, not as the mother of the child in her arms, but as Zariah. And that was enough. She reached for his hand. "Then let's start there." She clutched her baby with one arm and threw the other in front of the truck's tire, shielding the boy who had never even spoken her name. "Now?" Nathan calls her name every morning. Grant says it like it's sacred. And Zariah? She finally believes she deserves to be seen. Do you believe true love can survive even after being tested this hard? Let us know in the comments. And if this story touched you, subscribe. Not just for the next story, but because you saw yourself in this one.